According to climate.gov, 2019 was the second warmest year on record. As carbon emissions continue to rise, so does the average temperature of the Earth. The rising temperature of our planet causes real changes in ecosystems all around us. For example, according to Scientific American, quote, moose numbers have declined roughly 10% in Maine and as much as 50% in New Hampshire since the early 2000s. This is because of the growing population of ticks due to shorter winters. Climate change allows the ticks to expand their natural habit range, subsequently allowing them to kill more moose. Climate change also affects humans as well. California and Australia have both experienced droughts and massive wildfires in recent years. As the polar ice caps start to melt, we may also see some coastlines shrink. In order to combat climate change, we need to reduce our carbon footprint. This can be achieved by utilizing renewable energy and reducing reliance on energy products that require carbon emissions. Windmills, although not the most effective at producing energy, are a promising source of renewable energy. Though they may pose risks to birds, careful placement and design can mitigate that risk. With these considerations, windmills produce a long-term payoff with little to no drawbacks. Every year, windmills contribute to a significant number of bird deaths. Nick Harvey and Romana E.C. Dew estimated that, quote, wind turbines comprise only 0.003% of bird fatalities. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that in some locations, such as Altamont Pass in California, the incidence of wind-related bird fatalities is unacceptably high, especially of quote-unquote charismatic birds, such as falcons and eagles, unquote. While the percentage of birds killed by wind turbines is actually low compared to what you might think, it is still too high. Nick Harvey and Romana E.C. Dew point out in that same article that, quote, the Bald Hills Wind Farm development in Victoria had potential impact on a rare and endangered species of coastal migratory bird, the orange-bellied parrot. If the placement of windmills isn't careful and thorough, they may have the potential to negatively impact birds, especially those at high risk of becoming extinct. A lot of problems that windmills and wind farms can cause are because of poor planning from the government. In a study on windmills in Australia, the article said, quote, there does not appear to be any national strategic approach to the sitting of wind farms, and nor has it been treated as a coastal management issue. The result has been a largely unforeseen and unplanned cumulative impact on the visual quality of many Australian rural coastal landscapes. Unquote. If you plan out the placement of wind farms poorly, then there is a chance they may lead to unnecessary bird deaths and may be a detriment to the view of a coastline. Ideally, you should try and put wind farms out of the way of bird migratory paths and endangered bird habitats. In the journal article, Limited Impact of a Small Residential Wind Turbine on Birds on an Offshore Island in Maine, it's evident that with the correct placement and design of wind turbines, their impact on birds can be limited. The windmill talked about in the article is located on a private island, which is a good location for two reasons. Firstly, many birds don't fly near this island, and secondly, it doesn't impact the visual quality of any coastlines. In this article, Morris and Stump state, quote, we never documented a turbine-related mortality during our twice daily surveys during the 10 seasons studied. The article goes on to state that, quote, our study may also demonstrate the importance of carefully choosing a location for a turbine to avoid negative effects on birds and bird behavior. The article also points out the importance of choosing a design to limit the amount of negative impact a wind turbine can have on birds, with the article stating, quote, the turbine designed for Appledore Island included several features intended to limit the effects of birds, including a monopole as the support structure and one black blade to produce contrast to the white blades for increased visibility, unquote. Obviously, the location and design of a wind turbine is crucial to preventing bird deaths. The turbine on Appledore Island clearly demonstrates that wind turbines can have little to no impact to birds if the location and design are chosen carefully. But what about wind turbines' effects on humans? Some people claim that the sound wind turbines emit have a negative effect on human health. This rumor, however, has been debunked. The Australian article on wind turbines points out, quote, there have also been reports of the wind turbine syndrome, although this is not specifically a coastal issue. Reviews of medical literature by Chapin et al. Found that the evidence for attribution was very poor and conclude that subaudible low-frequency sound and infrasound does not pose a direct risk to human health, unquote. This issue is actually a non-issue and is just straight out false, showing that it is important to only get scientific information from scientific experts. In order to properly make sure the methods we put in place to reduce bird deaths near wind farms are actually effective, we need to adopt effective methods of counting how many birds die as well. A journal article about the reporting of bird deaths near windmills stated that, quote, if the time interval between carcass searches more than the permanence of a carcass in an area, then observers will only detect a small percentage of these. This means you must search regularly for bird carcasses in order to find them near a windmill before scavengers come to take them away. The same study found that, quote, these results indicate that the recommended monitoring period of 7 to 14 days for carcass search surveys is insufficient, especially when recording the impact on small-sized birds, unquote. We should actually be surveying for bird carcasses near windmills multiple times a week in order to make sure that what we find is accurate. If we plan out the design and location of windmills carefully, they can provide huge upsides. A fact sheet from the Atlantic Utilities Authority states that for 5 windmills, quote, each turbine is capable of producing 1.5 megawatts for a total of 7.5 megawatts, enough energy to power approximately 2,000 homes. And that, quote, it is estimated that the energy produced by the wind farm saves energy equivalent of 11,964 barrels of crude oil per year, unquote. Not only do wind turbines produce a massive amount of energy each year, but they can also pay themselves off long term, with the ACUA also stating, quote, the wind farm has been operational since December 2005 and has saved the ACUA more than $6.1 million in its first 14 years of operation, unquote. The fact sheet goes on to say that, quote, the project cost was $12.5 million. Community Energy received a $1.7 million grant from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities and a $1.92 million customer supply grant through Atlantic City Electric, unquote. Subtracting the $3.62 million in grants, we can observe that 68% of the cost has already been recuperated by 2019, and by doing simple math, we can estimate that the windmill should be completely paid off by 2025. In conclusion, while turbines may seem to have numerous disadvantages at first glance, many of these disadvantages can be remedied with smart planning, and some of these disadvantages are completely false. Wind turbines are an important part of renewable energy production and a pathway to a future where our climate is no longer changing at alarming rates. So, what can you do to help? Well, there's a couple things actually. As Americans, we have the right to vote for a new president every 4 years, as well as senators every 2 to 4 years, and state legislation too. Look into your state's politicians on a local and national level and see which ones support the development of renewable energy, specifically wind turbines, and make sure to vote for them. You can also call your state's senators and tell them what you've learned today. The phone number for the Massachusetts Senate is 617-722-1276, and the phone number for Massachusetts senators in D.C. are 202-224-2742 for Senator Ed Markey and 202-224-4543. for Elizabeth Warren. Lastly, don't vote for those who criticize renewable energy or wind power. They use misleading information and don't want to put in the effort to secure the future for citizens of the United States. Anyway, I've been Matthew Hinspeter, and that's why you should support wind power and wind turbines. Thank you for watching.